Hi everybody, thanks for connecting with me again today. So we are in week 3 of our series on the story of Jonah. And you might remember that in the first week we gave a bit of an overview of the story. Really quickly, story goes something like this. God was talking to one of his spokespeople one day, Jonah, and he says, I want you to go to Nineveh and tell them about me. And Jonah wanted nothing to do with it, and he ran the opposite direction as far as he possibly could get away. And God got Jonah's attention with a storm when he was on the boat, and then by being swallowed by a whale. And then eventually Jonah gave in to what God was asking him to do and went to Nineveh. And last week we talked about God's, the overarching theme of God's love for people who are far from him. And we'll see that again in our discussion today. But today I want to talk about something that I think is the most intriguing or remarkable parts of the story, and that is Jonah's lousy attitude. Remember, this is God's chosen person, right? This is the man of God who was acting as God's spokesperson, and Jonah came off looking really, really bad in the story. So let's pick it up here in Jonah chapter 3, verse 10, at the end of chapter 3. Says that when God saw what the Ninevites had done and how they had put a stop to their evil ways, he changed his mind and did not carry out the destruction he had threatened. And then the very next verse in chapter 4, verse 1, this change of plans greatly upset Jonah, and he became very angry. So he complained to the Lord about it. Didn't I say before I left home that you would do this, Lord? That is why I ran away to Tarshish. I knew that you were a God, that you were a merciful and compassionate God, slow to get angry and filled with unfailing love. You are eager to turn back from destroying people. Remember, this is Jonah's argument against God. He's really upset at God for not destroying Nineveh. And his argument against God is that I knew that you are a merciful and compassionate God. We would think, oh, that's a good thing, right? But not for Jonah. I knew that you're a merciful and compassionate God, slow to get angry, filled with unfailing love. You're eager to turn back from destroying people. And now listen, just kill me now, Lord. I would rather be dead than alive if what I predicted will not happen. Notice the self-centeredness, kind of sulky, petulant child, kind of, just kill me now. I'd rather be dead than alive if what I predicted, will not happen. Look at the Lord's reply in verse 4. Is it right for you to be angry about this? God puts it in the form of a question, but really God is saying, Jonah, your attitude sucks here. Like, you should not be angry about this. And then verse 5, when Jonah went out then Jonah went out to the east side of the city and made a shelter to sit under as he waited to see what would happen to the city. Read between the lines. Jonah is still hoping that God is going to bomb the city, that God is going to destroy Nineveh. He goes outside of the city so he can watch, so he can see what would happen to the city. And then verse 6, and the Lord God arranged for a leafy plant to grow there, and soon it spread its broad leaves over Jonah's head, shading him from the sun. And then there's kind of this exchange, the story about this leafy plant that God causes to grow up quickly and then to die quickly. And I'm sure there's symbolism there with the plant and how that fits into the story. But it's really interesting that this story ends with no resolution. This is how the story ends. The book of Jonah ends in verse 9. Then God said to Jonah, is it right for you to be angry because the plant died? Jonah was a petulant child. He's like, the plant died, and now I'm sitting in the sun, and God says, is it right for you to be angry because the plant died? Yes, Jonah retorted, even angry enough to die. Like, Jonah is really ticked off at this point, right? And then verse 10, then the Lord said, you feel sorry about the plant, though you did nothing to put it there. It came quickly and died quickly. But verse 11 is the key verse. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness. Hear the care in God's words, in his voice, the care for people. But Nineveh has 120,000 people living there in spiritual darkness, not to mention all the animals. Interesting that God kind of cared about the animals too. 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention all the animals. Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city, God said? And listen, and that's the end of the story. That's how the book of Jonah ends, right? There is no resolution as far as Jonah is concerned in the story. Now remember that Jonah is the one who is telling the story. He's the one who wrote the book. And if I were writing the book and telling the story, I would put some kind of a footnote at least at the end, like, oh yeah, and I eventually came around, I saw God's way, and I learned to love the Ninevites, right? I would make myself look a little bit better, but Jonah doesn't do that. Jonah ends the story unresolved in his lousy attitude, right? And, I think that it's remarkable that Jonah actually sheds such a negative light on himself. He does not come off looking as a great man of God, as God's great spokesperson, right? I think that we could summarize Jonah's lousy attitude in kind of a few different things. One, for sure, ethnocentrism, as in my ethnicity, my group, my posse is the center of the world. And that certainly would have been the case in his Jewish understanding of God's chosen people, that we Jews are the only important people, ethnocentric. And, so just ethnocentrism, my group is better than your group. But discriminating, I think, would be another word that we could use to describe. Looking down on the Ninevites, like those wicked sinners, like I'm better than they are. But also the polarization, the pulling into two different camps. There's us over here, and there are those evil people, those Ninevites, those wicked Ninevites, and a great gap between the two, and not being willing to bridge that gap. There's a lot of stuff going on here, for Jonah, I think, in his anger towards the Ninevites and anger towards God, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. I said, I remember saying in the first week, I think it would have been maybe, that this story is almost 3,000 years old. 2,800 years old is this story. It happened a long, long time ago. 2,800 years ago, but this story has very relevant themes for us today. Issues around nationalism, or ethnocentrism, like my ethnic group, my group is more important than your nationalism, like pulling into nations. Issues around discrimination, looking down on people who are different than us, and for sure, issues of polarization. It's very easy to see that, at least in the Canadian, and for sure easy to see in the American social landscape, that is becoming very, very polarized. There are two different camps, and the two camps don't see eye to eye, right? And so it's really easy to see how in our modern day culture today, in 2025, that we've become very polarized, and we reflect many of the values and many of the thoughts and feelings that Jonah did. A couple of months ago, I think it would be back in March maybe, we had lunch. I had lunch with some pastor friends in BIC, pastor friends. And we had just gotten back from Florida just a few weeks before. I had this lunch with my friends, and I was just expressing my views on being in Florida and seeing signage and even some T-shirts that were really pretty disturbing in terms of political views and support of the president and stuff. And I found it disturbing. I found it hard to understand. And so in our lunch, we were talking about this issue of polarization, and I was sharing, with my friends about being in Florida and seeing this stuff. And I said something to the effect of like, it makes no sense to me how, this current president was reelected. Like, how is it possible that the majority of Americans elected, the president again, right? And I just was expressing my bewilderment, or like, I just don't get it. And really, I was being critical. I was being critical of our American brothers and sisters for their political choices, right? And Aaron, who was sitting right beside me to my left, he said, something to the effect of like, I was like, I can't even understand like how people would do that. And Aaron said something to the effect of, just listen to their story. Ask them, can you tell me your story? Can you tell me how you arrived, at this position, right? Just talk to me. Tell me your story. And it really landed for me. One, because it helped me really see that I was flat out being critical of people who had different views than me. But it really also landed for me because the value of listening to other people's stories, it really hit me. I love this quote by Madeleine L'Engle. I'm sure I pronounced her name terribly, but she said, "Because we fail to listen to each other's stories, we are becoming a fragmented human race." Wow. That resonates with me. Because we fail to listen to each other's stories, we are becoming a fragmented human race. Friends, when we learn to listen to each other's stories, first of all, I think it does different things. Listening to stories of people who have different views than we do, or maybe a different lifestyle than we do, right? When we learn to listen to other people's stories, first of all, it helps me to learn. Right? It helps me to listen and receive and learn, from a different perspective. So one, it helps me to learn. Two, it communicates respect. That I respect you to hear your story. I may not agree with, and that's not the issue, but I respect you enough. It communicates respect. And three, I think when we learn to listen to each other's stories, that it helps to bring us together. We increase understanding. Again, we might not agree, but we increase understanding, and it helps to bring us together. There's a song, Coldplay is one of kind of my go-to groups in my Spotify playlist, playlists plural. And Coldplay has a song called Arabesque, as in, Arabs kind of thing. And it's talking about Arab and non-Arab, or Muslim and non-Muslim relationships. And the beginning of the song says, "I could be you, you could be me, two raindrops in the same sea. You could be me, I could be you, two angles of the same view. And we share the same blood." And then it goes on, we share the same blood. And the idea of the song is that you may be from a different country than I am, you may be from a different ethnic background than I am, you may be a different religious background than I am, but listen, we are two angles of the same view. We're two raindrops in the same sea. We share the same blood, right? Really, at the end of the day, we're all humans. And we all have basically the same desires. We have basically the same fears. There's more that unites us than separates us, right? Because we're all human. In Genesis 1:27, says that so God created human beings in his own image, and then he repeats it, in the image of God he created them. We are all, every single human being, created in God's beautiful image. And we were created to live our best life reflecting God's image with confidence and creativity and all the C words and joy and peace and love. That's how God created every single human being. And so there's more, I might look at somebody with a different political view than me, but there's more that unites us than separates us if you really scratch beneath the surface. I think that Jesus said it best. And, there's an idea, this Jesus guy, he actually has something to say. Jesus says it best in Matthew 22. When somebody asks him, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" And Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." And I can just imagine Jesus pausing here and the people in the crowd being like, "Yes, like we're all in on that one. Love the Lord your God. Yeah, that's it." And I imagine Jesus pausing and then coming up with, but don't get ahead of yourself. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all its demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Can I just quickly finish by reading from something that James has to say? In biblical James, not James Montgomery, but biblical James in James chapter 3. He's talking about the power of our tongue and how hard it is to tame our words. People can tame all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, fish, but no one can tame the tongue. It's restless and evil, full of deadly poison. And here's the example that James gives. Sometimes our tongue praises our Lord and Father, and sometimes it curses those who have been made in the image of God. There's the reference to Genesis 1:27. And so blessing and cursing come pouring out of the same mouth. Surely, my brothers and sisters, this is not right. So James is saying, listen, in moments that you feel critical, in moments that you feel like you're looking down on people, in moments that you're speaking ill of another human being made in God's image, in those moments, just think about this for a moment. How is it possible that in one breath you say, "Oh, Jesus, I love you, I worship you, I sing worship songs to you," and and like saying unkind things or thinking unkind thoughts about another of God's children. And James says, listen to me, just very blunt, very bold, this is not right, And so, friends, maybe instead of, it's our culture is so full of division and polarization. And I think that in many ways we don't even realize how divided we are because it's the water that we're swimming in. It's like we've just become accustomed to it because it is the water that we're swimming in. But, if we apply God's ideas, here we have two choices. Do we apply Jonah's ideas? You guys are losers. You're the worst. You're wicked, evil people. Your lifestyle or your political views. Do we choose Jonah's, response, or do we choose God's response of unending love and grace and acceptance and invitation to live your best life as God's creation, So anyways, we'll have a good conversation about this on Sunday. My time is up and I need to go, but if you can be with us on Sunday, we look forward to seeing you. God bless you, friends.